It is time for the return of this week's RSPW Rewind. It's good to get back to some lighthearted RSPW content. I know it's been a few weeks. There's been a lot of news, a lot of long shows, but I wanted to make sure I got one in this week. It's been too long. I've got a few posts this week for your sports entertainment with a medley of random posts. Starting with November 23rd, 1993. We're going way back. A post by Bill titled Vince, the Feds, and the WWF. Some context is needed here before I get into this. 4 days earlier, Vince McMahon was indicted on federal charges tied to the distribution of anabolic steroids, and he was headed for trial the following year. So this post comes on the heels of that indictment. Here is a scenario for comment. Vince McMahon goes to trial. Bobby the Brain Heenan takes control of Titan Sports. Vince runs Bobby via Linda McMahon. Hulk Hogan testifies against McMahon, and Hulk attempts to maintain his say your prayers, eat your vitamins, exercise, and believe in the Hulkster image. Randy Macho Man Savage continues to deteriorate, going totally gonzo over Hogan's turncoat ways, both the steroid denial and past interference with Randy's marriage. The Macho Man loses it completely and is shipped off to the funny farm. Jim Cornette strengthens his role in the WWF and gains a measure of control. The WWF flounders during McMahon's trial. If McMahon beats the charges, we return to WWF, business as usual. If he goes to the Slammer, a major power struggle develops at Titan between Heenan and Cornette. RSPW takes up a collection and sends greeting cards to Savage at the home. Mark Carlton replies, the parent company of the WWF is Titan Sports, which is owned by Vince McMahon. Even if Vince goes to jail, Vince could still run the WWF via Linda and nobody would know the difference. I don't believe that Cornette or Heenan have much of a chance. The guys that work in the WWF office, like Rene Goulet, Pat Patterson, Robert Remus, that's Sergeant Slaughter, are the ones who might be involved in a power struggle. Bill says, point well taken. I know Titan Sports is privately owned. Not knowing Linda McMahon or her leadership skills, I proposed a caretaker leader like Bobby Heenan. Should that happen and should Bobby succeed in strengthening his role, he might be able to battle Linda for control. Yes, she would be the owner, but not totally in control. You are surely right about the potential for a struggle due to Pat Patterson and all of the others. I don't know how the Brain would have done in such a role. I don't even know that he would have wanted to be in a role like that he would have wanted the pressures of running the company. I know the story is that Jerry Jarrett was brought in as something of a fail-safe, and it's been denied. I don't know if it was Bruce Pritchard or somebody said that that's not true, that wasn't the case, that's not why he was brought in, but that's been the story for a long time, and Jerry Jarrett, I think, has actually talked about it, that part of the reason, or the reason that he did get brought in to the WWF was as a backup, as a fail-safe in case Vince McMahon went to prison. And in fact, I think it was Bruce Pritchard who disputed his claims and said that they had brought Jerry Jarrett in even before all of that, which is possible, but that doesn't mean that, they didn't look to him as, hey, this has now happened. If Vince goes to jail, we'll have Jerry kind of take charge of things. But Pritchard, I think, has slammed him before. He says that, Jarrett never had any good ideas to contribute. Well, I mean, they're not as good as Bruce Pritchard's ideas. It can't possibly be as good as those. I mean, we just had, Jeff Hardy throwing urine on Sheamus a few weeks ago, which was actually a repeat of an angle they did 14 years ago. Now that's good shit, pal. Anyway, I can't ever imagine Vince McMahon delegating any important decisions to anybody else. Even when he brought in Cowboy Bill Watts in '95 and told the roster he'd be running things creatively, he's going to have full autonomy. Watts learned very quickly that was not going to be the case and he quit. So long as there is breath in his body, Vince McMahon will be the only person running WWE. March 20th, 1997. Days after Bret Hart's cuss-filled tirade on Raw, Ken Purcell is here with a post titled, WWF Kisses the Wrong Asses. Says, I guess I like Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin makes a good heel, but to build these guys up so much and always have them come out on top or look good is bullshit. The last few minutes of Raw Monday night, when Shawn came out and kind of stood over everybody and all the chaos, like he was so above all of this, and the way he kisses up to Vinnie Mac is pathetic. I've read a few posts where it was written that maybe Shawn isn't really hurt, and he just didn't want a job to Bret Hart at WrestleMania. Come to think of it, does Shawn job to anybody anymore? Who else in professional wrestling never loses a belt to another wrestler? That is part of the job. But isn't it always convenient for him to just give it up? Of course, he usually gets it back, but a lot of wrestlers could beat him. Bret Hart for one. But I forgot. I shouldn't mention Bret Hart since no one can stand or appreciate him anymore. Too bad. He's a class act. He's not a cheap shot artist like Stone Cold. He's not a pretty boy egomaniac like Shawn Michaels. And one thing he's not anymore for sure is a suck-up like the other two definitely are. It's too bad because Bret Hart deserves better. Like he said, there ain't no justice anymore. Maybe he already had his day in the sun, but he's just too good to fade away. Bret Hart and the Road Warriors. Ain't no one better. Sayball says, if you think about it, each and every time Bret Hart has lost the world title, an angle about him crying has taken place. WrestleMania 9, Mr. Fuji threw salt in my eyes, Hogan got the title shot first. Survivor Series 94, wait a minute, my mom wasn't the towel person. WrestleMania 12, there was no overtime. Monday Night Raw when he dropped the title to Sid, I got screwed. Is this an angle? Bret Hart is a damn good wrestler, but he's just as big an egomaniac as Hogan, or maybe worse. Well, that's just simply not possible. I know Bret Hart can come off as being full of himself, but to say that he's worse than Hogan in that respect, I don't know about that one. The original says, damn, you sound like you're whining as bad as Bret is. Is beating Stone Cold Steve Austin not enough? Forget that Austin did the job yet again. Bret's just not over anymore. The fans have lost respect for him, and I have too. He is a good worker with a Hogan-sized ego problem. So instead of staying a face and hearing a few more boos, he wants to be a heel so he can be over too. Not going to happen. He is not as popular as he once was. Macdaddy West chimes in. You seem to forget what happened in the past WrestleManias, don't you? Remember when Bret Hart had to job to both Yokozuna and Hogan in the span of 30 minutes? Remember last year when Bret Hart had to practically job to Diesel, Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels around the time of last year's WrestleMania? He had to also job to Bob Backlund for the title. Did you forget that? I would like to see Shawn Michaels do the same thing. I don't think it would ever happen. You seem to forget that Bret is willing to do anything for the company. He has sacrificed and jobbed many times, all for Titan Sports. He could have signed with Turner for way more money, but he remained loyal. Stone Cold Steve Austin is a good gimmick, I can't deny that, but his wrestling skills his wrestling skills leave something to be desired. Stone Cold can't even do a simple drop kick. Even at 38, the Hitman can still fly with the best of them. Why do they call him the excellence of execution? When you take a close look at him wrestle, all of his moves are picture perfect. Bret has a very good form. When it comes to executing moves, no one in pro wrestling today can match up to the form that the Hitman executes. I'm starting to think here that maybe Bret Hart had a few aliases on the RSPW forums back in the day. I have a feeling that Macdaddy West might just be Bret the Hitman Hart. I'm just throwing it out there. That would be hilarious, by the way. But anyway, he says, no one in professional wrestling today can match up to the form that the Hitman executes. Stone Cold has the attitude, which sways people to believe that he is a great, great wrestler, but he is all hype. His wrestling skills don't match up to his attitude. I am not a big Bret Hart fan. Oh, you could have fooled me. I am not a big Bret Hart fan. I am a loyal fan who has been watching the sport for over 15 years. People have to look beyond what is scripted and should actually look at what's going on behind the curtain. This response was not meant to insult you, and I apologize if I did in any way. Well, that did not end the way I thought it would end. It actually ended in a very respectful manner. But there you go. He's made his thoughts very clear about Bret Hart. Let's move along here. August 5th, 1997. If I remember correctly, SummerSlam was very early in the month. Actually, they had a lot of pay-per-views in 97 that were like the first Sunday of the month, which was very unusual. Usually it was like the third or fourth Sunday in a given month. But I think it was like SummerSlam was August 3rd. I think the Ground Zero in your house was like September 7th. Bad Blood, which was the night Pillman died. That was the first Hell in a Cell. I know that was October 5th because I was away. I wasn't even able to watch it live. That was the day before my birthday. I know that. The Montreal Screwjob was November 9. And then I think that December in your house was also like December 7th or 6th or something like that. So anyway, I don't know why I thought of that, but August 5th, 1997. Talus 2469 with a post titled, "Why All This Hatred for Shawn Michaels?" Okay, why does RSPW hate Shawn so much? He's charismatic, he's in great shape, and he's a decent wrestler. He's a decent wrestler. That's the first time I've ever heard somebody call Shawn Michaels a decent wrestler. And he's putting him over, too. He's putting him over in this post. He calls Shawn Michaels a decent wrestler. All right, okay. Says, if a wrestler is meant to draw fans, I would say Michaels is a success. Some of his cockiness could be attributed to the success of the other Clique members. You have to admit, he seems to get the job done. What are your beefs against him? John Petrie here is a HBK supporter. He says, don't ask me, I love the guy. As for why RSPW hates him, it goes something like this. From 1992 to 1994, when Shawn was a heel, he was a favorite of all the work rate fans on RSPW. They loved his attitude, they loved his bump-taking ability, and his interviews. This is, by the way, the reason that so many of these same types of people like Hunter Hearst Helmsley today. In 1995, when he did the face turn, many RSPWers hated it because they thought McMahon ruined his character. He was no longer the smart fans wrestler, he belonged to the marks. Then most of these people left RSPW. Since last year, most of the people here in this forum have hated Shawn Michaels because they see him as the latest Hulk Hogan type character, unbeatable and a weak finisher. This year, since most RSPWers desperately want to be smarts, they trash Michaels for not jobbing, or if they're marks, they say that he's whining. In general, all WCW fans hate him because they don't have him. If he suddenly left for WCW, they would all love him, while most WWF fans would declare him washed up. What most of his critics overlook, or refuse to admit, is that he still delivers some of the best interviews in the business, and is a better all-around wrestler when he does wrestle than most of his co-workers. They're too busy shaking their heads as he is shaking his ass. Marvin Jones says, RSPW hates Shawn because he's extremely popular with the unwashed masses, and you cannot be cool if you like what the majority likes. Some might say that attitude still prevails today in pro wrestling. October 16th, 2003. A post by Art titled, Okay, Who's the Idiot Who Said This? And he linked to an article that is no longer active, but at the time it was on the Pro Wrestling Torch website. I believe it was an interview transcript from a radio interview. Anyway, this is what he said. Who said the following on a radio show 10 years ago this week? What could you possibly see in Ric Flair? I mean this. This is the truth. Ric Flair is the most overrated wrestler there ever was. If you've seen Ric Flair wrestle once, you've seen him wrestle 1,000,000 times. He's the most uncreative, unimaginative wrestler that there ever was. He was the pits. You don't know anything about wrestling if you think Ric Flair is the greatest wrestler. Wrestling Ric Flair was the biggest letdown of my entire career. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate Ric Flair at about a 3. He sucks. I'd even say Jerry Lawler quite conceivably has at least a little more imagination than Ric Flair. Ric Flair, I don't hate him or anything. I hear all the time that Ric Flair is the greatest. I don't know how anyone could even begin to think that he was good. If you've seen Ric Flair wrestle one time, you've seen Ric Flair's whole show. I already knew the answer to this question, by the way, before I was even done reading the full RSPW post when I found it, because I remember hearing about this years ago. But I'll give you a few seconds to guess for yourself before I spoil it here. Who said that about Ric Flair? Who do you think said that about Ric Flair? Triumph the Insult Comic Dog says, "Who cares who said it? It's the truth. Woof." And anyway, in fact, the correct answer is Bret Hart. Bret Hart was no fan of Ric Flair's work. There has been a war of words between Bret Hart and Ric Flair just going on for years. Flair in his book, I think it was in his book, said that Bret never drew a dime. He called him a pissant in the history of wrestling. That probably, I'm assuming that came years after this radio interview that Bret did, so more than likely, Flair being very harsh on Bret like that in his book probably had to do as a receipt for what Bret had said about him. That's my guess. But remember, no matter what these two may say about each other, they do not like each other. And we'll end with this. Going back to March 2nd, 1998, RSPW was graced with a post by Jim Hellwig, the Ultimate Warrior, titled Message to RSPW. To those with whom this salutation may concern, hello all, Warrior here. I have existentiated myself to this domain to reponsitate to the overwhelming rumors circulating about my impending acquiescence to the disseminated realm of professional entertainment. Yes, the truth is of the essence that I, the Warrior, will be vaginating to WCW this Monday night on the celestial transmission of Nitro. That's right, I will be on Nitro Monday, the second day of the third month of what you Earthlings substantiate to be a solar calendar year. In this, the year of 1998, on the eve of the millennium. I have re-inseminated myself to wrestling because I felt the obsolescence of myself as the sands in the hourglass of my career sifted away. I do not know which side I will be gravitating towards, be it the NWO or WCW, but hitherto whereupon I return, it will be cosmic, to say the least. So watch TNT tonight and familiarize, initiate, and nonetheless analogize yourself to WCW. Always believe. P.S. Anyone who would like to email me can do so at warrior@steroid.com.